If we look for an answer to the question of how mind and body are connected, then we must at least take science seriously, because that is our best way of acquiring knowledge. We must therefore reject those positions that go against the knowledge acquired by science. Hence, we cannot accept Descartes' substance dualism or Berkeley's idealism. The mind must also be taken seriously. Behaviorism, according to Ryle, is a position that many believe to be a theory that actually leaves out the mind, but in fact should be about the mind. What we want is a theory that takes both the mind and science seriously. The first theory that does this is the identity theory. The identity theory is a version of physicalism. In general, physicalism states that there are no non-physical things and that insofar as mental states exist, they are somehow determined by the physical world, whereby what is physical is explained by our most recent theory in physics. According to the identity theory, mental states are identical with certain brain states. To understand this properly, we need to know what we mean and what we do not mean by identity in this theory. Although it concerns the mental states of people, here identity has nothing to do with who you are, or in other words, it has nothing to do with personal identity. The notion of identity we are concerned with is about quantitative or numerical identity, which we can distinguish from qualitative identity. If you have 2 brands of coffee, they can be just as tasty. You won't taste the difference between a cup of coffee from brand 1 and a cup of coffee from brand 2. Both brands are of identical quality, but numerically they are 2 different brands. Numerical or quantitative identity applies to one thing that we are talking about in 2 ways. You could say that someone is Socrates. Later, it may turn out that he's Xanthippes' husband. Both phrases, Socrates and Xanthippes' husband, refer to the same thing, that very individual. Socrates is identical to the husband of Xanthippe. In the same way, mental states would be identical to certain brain states. Identity theorists take science seriously and do not accept metaphysical nonsense, such as mental substances and God. One of the principles they adhere to, which also happens to be a reason identity theorist Jack Smart thinks the identity theory is correct, is Occam's razor. Occam's razor, named after William of Ockham, states that you should not postulate entities in your theory without necessity. If you wonder why someone survived a car accident, you can give 2 explanations for that. The first one states that the person survived the accident because he had a good airbag. The second statement says that he survived because he had a good airbag and a good guardian angel. Both theories are just as good, but the first postulates fewer entities, so we prefer that theory. If we now go back to the mind-body problem, then it is more parsimonious to postulate only brain states to explain human behavior than to postulate them in separate mental states. Mental states do exist, but they are simply identical to certain brain states. The identity theory is also known as reductive materialism, because mental states are reduced to brain states. Often a strange thinking error occurs among the opponents of the theory. When people hear that some philosophers reduce mental states to certain brain states, they believe that this means that mental states do not exist. Then the identity theory would be incorrect, because it is obvious that mental states do exist. But the opposite is true. If we can show that mental states can be reduced to certain brain states, then those mental states are real because they're identical to real brain states. Only when mental states cannot be identified with brain states do we have to eliminate them. The identity theory is the first theory that takes both the mind and science seriously. The theory is therefore a good candidate to explain how the mind fits into the rest of the physical world.